Jaya Patel stepped off the red-eyed flight at LAX just as dawn's first light brushed the palm-lined boulevards. The air tasted of exhaust and ambition, and as she navigated the crowded terminal, with two suitcases, a fragile portfolio of demos, and a heart full of hopes, she felt the weight of every dream she'd carried halfway across the world. Born and raised in Mumbai's vibrant theater district, Jaya had lent her voice to radio dramas and local ad campaigns, earning praise for her warm timbre and expressive range. Yet here in the heart of Tinseltown, her accent marked her as an outsider. Exotic, maybe charming, but never quite one of us. She arrived at Vox Studios for her first audition, her palms slick on the resumes she'd printed in triplicate. The lobby gleamed with chrome and bright posters of blockbusters, each celebrating a native voice whose subtly neutral intonation catered to the broadest possible audience. Jaya's heart pounded as the receptionist, an impeccably dressed young woman with a name tag reading Lexi, offered a tight smile. "First time?" Lexi asked, scanning Jaya's papers in one dismissive flick. "Room 3B, down the hall. Knock twice, then wait for someone to let you in." Inside the dimly lit booth, Jaya met the casting director, a man named Trent whose spectacles reflected the script's opening lines like a spotlight. He listened without expression as she read the first paragraph, a gritty trailer promo demanding gravitas and subtlety. When she finished, Trent tapped his pen, exchanged a glance with the sound engineer, and said, "Your accent's distinctive." His tone dropped in amusement. "Ever considered a dialect coach?" The engineer stifled a laugh behind the microphone. Jaya forced her composure, drawing a steadying breath. "I've studied General American pronunciation extensively," she replied, voice holding firm, "but I believe authenticity in voice can convey unique texture." Trent arched an eyebrow. "Texture's fine," he said, waving a hand, "but studios want vanilla. No one sticks their neck out for spices." The brusque dismissal cut deeper than any critique. Undeterred, Jaya moved to the next audition room, where a local indie game developer awaited her. He greeted her with a bright, finally a brown face, then leaned back in his chair. "Can you sound, American?" His tenor was friendly but laced with condescension. "Because I love the work, but players might find your delivery hard to sync." Jaya bit back a retort about cultural richness, instead offering a clipped, "I can adapt," and recited the character's lines again, smoothing her syllables until they nearly lost the warmth of her heritage. By late afternoon, she had visited 5 studios, faced 9 directors, and her portfolio of 20 recorded takes lay crumpled on tables like discarded offerings. Each time her accent slid through a vowel or clipped a consonant differently, a judge's lips twitched in amusement or raised in disbelief. "You really think you can carry a national campaign with that twang?" "Hollywood doesn't do accents, sweetie. Your voice is too regional." The repeated refrains wore at her resolve until she slipped out of the last booth shaking, her cheeks hot with humiliation. On the ride back to her shared apartment in Burbank, a cramped 2-bedroom with 3 other aspiring actors, Jaya replayed every mocking glance and snide remark. The other tenant, a lanky barista-turned-actor named Tyler, greeted her at the door with sympathetic eyes. Over lukewarm chai, he listened as she recounted the day's indignities. "They don't get it," she said, voice tight. "They think accent equals flaw, not identity." Tyler nodded. "Stick to your voice," he encouraged. "One day they'll crave exactly what you bring." That night, Jaya shut the door to her makeshift bedroom and leaned against its frame, the weight of her dream pressing in. She clicked on her laptop and opened a blank audio project. As moonlight slanted through the Venetian blinds, she recorded a rich, emotional passage from a classic Indian folk tale. No editing, no American affectation, soaked in the rhythmic inflection of her mother tongue. When she finished, she played it back, her voice resonating with authenticity, every vowel and consonant infused with the cadence of home. In the silence that followed, Jaya realized that Hollywood's glass ceiling wasn't just a barrier, it was a challenge. If her accent was the reason she'd been laughed at, it could be the very thing that set her apart when she found the right story to tell. Tucking her recorder under her pillow, she vowed that her next audition wouldn't hide her roots, but would celebrate them, forging a new path where authenticity became her greatest asset, and where the world would finally sit up and listen. The next morning, Jaya arrived at Vox Studios before sunrise, determined to prove herself despite yesterday's humiliations. The lobby was deserted, its glass walls reflecting the pale dawn light. She checked in with the security desk, an automated kiosk that buzzed her badge and directed her to Studio C. The corridor was lined with soundproof doors marked AZ, each padded with gray acoustic foam. Jaya paused outside Studio C, her heart thrumming like a tarabuka drum in her chest, then slipped inside. The booth was larger than she expected. A high vaulted ceiling, walls clad in deep burgundy velvet, and a state-of-the-art Neumann U87 microphone suspended from a shock mount. Cables snaked through the floor into a gleaming cherrywood console, where Ed Echo McAllister, the veteran sound engineer, sat behind rows of faders and glowing meters. His salt and pepper hair contrasted with a mischievous grin as he lifted the mic's pop filter and gestured for Jaya to step up. Jaya swallowed and positioned herself in front of the microphone, arms loose at her sides. She set her script on the slanted music stand. A fantasy trailer. In a world beyond memory, one hero's voice will ignite the spark of destiny. She cleared her throat and spoke into the mic. The console's meters leapt, and Ed leaned forward, tapping a button to play back her voice. Through the booth's monitor, Jaya heard her lines, warm and resonant, yet her Indian inflections clung to certain vowels. Before she could retake, Ed clicked the playback again, this time slowing it to a half speed. He tilted his head and remarked, loud enough for Jaya to hear, "Hear that lilt? Sounds like she's selling chai, not saving kingdoms." He smirked, then replayed the clip with exaggerated sibilance, making her S sounds hiss like steam. Behind Ed, peering through the glass, was the director, Ava Chen, clipboard in hand. At Ed's mockery, Ava stifled a giggle, her perfectly coiffed bob bobbing as she shook her head in amusement. Jaya kept her face impassive, though her cheeks warmed. She forced a polite smile and said, "Could we do one more take, please? I'd like to smooth that transition on Destiny." Ed clicked a fader, and the mic came to life again. Jaya repositioned her mouth, consciously rounding her lips on the diphthong, EI in Destiny, and delivered the line with measured clarity. In a world beyond memory, one hero's voice will ignite the spark of destiny. She held the final word, letting it resonate in the velvet enclosure. Ed nodded, although his smirk never fully faded, and tapped play. Jaya listened as the console's meters settled into a steady flow, her practiced enunciation evident but the faint cadences of her heritage still present. Ava scribbled notes. Great control on Ignite. Love the drama. Watch pacing on World Beyond Memory. Yet as Jaya gathered her script, Ed leaned forward again. Seriously, Jaya, he said, voice dripping condescension, you really ought to lose the roll on your R's and lighten that T. We need neutral, not Mumbai. He smirked at Ava, who nodded in agreement, though she looked a bit guilty. Jaya's throat tightened. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling her grandmother's voice echoing from the family theater in Bandra. Let your voice carry your truth, but let your craft carry your voice. She opened her eyes, steadied her spine, and said firmly, Thank you, Ed. I will work on those consonants. May I try the next line now? Ed waved her off impatiently, but she stepped up to the mic again. The next script page bore a poetic poem. Beneath the shattered sky, the final warrior stands alone. She slowed her pace, enunciating each consonant precisely. Her eshi sounds crisp, the R in warrior softened but distinct. After 3 takes, each time requesting only specific feedback on her articulation, she nailed the cadence and emotional depth. Ava offered an appreciative nod, while Ed simply said, All right, that'll do. Thank you. As Jaya packed her scripts, she noted every piece of feedback, Ed's mocking demands, Ava's directorial pointers, and her own mental corrections. She jotted in the margin. Work on T and R articulation. Maintain emotional resonance. Practice neutral American R, but keep warmth. Exiting the booth, Jaya passed Ed and Ava in the hallway. Ed waved dismissively. Ava gave her a faint smile that felt like a promise rather than a pardon. Jaya lifted her chin, returned the smile with professional grace, and walked away, the click of her heels echoing in the corridor. Later, back in her apartment, Jaya listened to the raw clips she'd recorded. The first full-speed take, the half-speed mockery, and her final refined reads. She typed detailed notes into her journal. mapping each vowel shift, marking tongue positions, and researching accent reduction tutorials. She spent the evening practicing in front of a mirror, repeating tongue twisters. Red lorry, yellow lorry, Peter Piper picked a peck, until her lips and tongue obeyed with near-perfect precision, even as she vowed never to let go of the unique warmth her Mumbai roots lent her voice. By midnight, Jaya had recorded 10 alternate takes, each addressing a different nuance of consonant and diphthong. Though her accent remained part of her identity, her craft had sharpened. That night, she fell asleep to the playback of her own voice, resilient, refined, and ready for the next audition, where her accent would no longer be fodder for mockery but a tool she wielded with precision and pride. Each night, long after the glossy studios along Sunset Boulevard had flickered off their neon signs, Jaya Patel crept through the hushed corridors of her one-bedroom apartment in Burbank. The other tenants, aspiring actors, freelance editors, and the occasional visiting director, slumbered in dreams of acceptance letters and greenlit projects. But for Jaya, the real work began when the world outside settled into silence. She would slip out of her borrowed blazer, hang it carefully beside her door, and transform her living room into a makeshift sound studio. Her equipment was modest. A second-hand USB condenser microphone perched on a borrowed stand, a laptop patched together with borrowed software, and a tangle of soundproofing panels she'd scavenged from local theater workshops. On her coffee table lay stacks of scripts, blockbuster trailer copies she'd downloaded from Voiceover forums, audiobook excerpts lifted from the public domain, and cinematic monologues from indie game promos. She'd annotate each page with 2 columns of notes, one to correct the pronunciation and pacing errors her coaches had flagged, the other to capture the emotional subtext she wanted to infuse: tremors of hope, flickers of menace, the tensile tension of a hero's first breath. At precisely midnight, she'd press record and begin her ritual. First came the familiar lines of the sci-fi trailer she'd used in her first audition, now transformed through relentless repetition into a fluid, power-driven cadence. In the shadow of a dying sun, her voice, free of yesterday's stumbles, rolled through every consonant with newfound authority. She experimented with pitch and timbre, layering takes to build a composite master track where her natural accent shimmered only where it served the story's authenticity. When she'd exhausted that script, often an hour later, she'd pivot to her secret passion: literary excerpts from classic Indian poetry and folk tales. There, in the verses of Tagore or the epics of the Mahabharata, Jaya found the emotional breadth that Hollywood sermons lacked. She recorded passages like, "The river sings its ancient song carrying sorrows of 1,000 moons," and listened as her voice danced between softness and steel, loose enough to honor her heritage, but precise enough to satisfy any Western ear, attuned to neutrality. Satisfied with her midnight symphony, Jaya would then slip online, using a VPN to mask her IP, and upload her dueling voice tracks to a small, invite-only voice actor forum. There, fellow internationals and seasoned dialect coaches offered her careful criticism: how to smooth the transition between I and I, how to curb her retroflex T without erasing its warmth, where to breathe for maximum dramatic tension. By 2 a.m., she'd integrate their tips into her next round of recordings, saving each file with clinical names like SFT Trailer V3 Final Wave or Poem Tagore Edit 2.mp3. Sometimes she posted anonymous blind demos on emerging streaming ad platforms, short 30-second voiceover teasers tagged Ensure Global Voice, where recruiters scrolled for fresh talent. Under a pseudonym Asha Singh, she garnered small but enthusiastic feedback. Loved the emotional color and very natural inflections. These strangers' praise, untainted by her identity, became her midnight fuel. By dawn, her laptop's battery would blink low, the microphone's diaphragm cool to the touch, and her notebook bulging with annotated feedback. She'd listen once more to her best takes: trailer teases that sparked goosebumps, poetic passages that whispered of distant monsoons, and archive them for tomorrow's auditions. As the first rays of sun edged through her blinds, Jaya would lean back in her chair, voice sore but triumphant, knowing that Hollywood's mocking mic tests had taught her the most valuable lesson: the world would hear her story. Not despite her accent, but because she had honed it into a razor-sharp instrument of authenticity. And when morning came, she carried those hidden scripts and clandestine recordings with her, a secret arsenal destined one day to shatter every laugh she'd ever endured. By the time Jaya Patel had perfected her midnight demos into razor-sharp perfection, it was well past 2 a.m. The Los Angeles skyline glittered beyond her window, and the only sounds in her cramped apartment were the soft hum of her USB interface and the distant siren of a passing ambulance. Months of clandestine practice, dialect drills, and emotional reconstructions had led to one final, secret experiment. She would upload a single 60-second teaser, narrating a high-octane sci-fi trailer in her own voice under a pseudonym to Voiceover, a niche streaming platform beloved by trailer editors and indie filmmakers. She created a burner account named Vox Enigma, chose a generic avatar, and titled the clip Shadow of the Star Siege, official teaser, narration. With a quick prayer to the gods of serendipity, she pressed publish. Within minutes, VoiceWave's algorithm indexed the file and placed it in the new releases queue alongside established professionals. Jaya closed her eyes, imagining the worst. A handful of plays, polite, nice job comments, and a swift slide into obscurity. But by sunrise, her phone buzzed uncontrollably. Her teaser had been featured in VoiceWave's Editor's Picks banner, an honor reserved for the most striking uploads of the week. The first comment blinked onto her screen. Who is this? That voice is unreal. Within an hour, the play count climbed from 27 to 2,043. On Twitter, a cult favorite trailer editor, Sham Cut and Boom, retweeted the link with the words, "Stop everything. This VO just destroyed my eardrums in the best way." His post exploded with likes and retweets, propelling Jaya's anonymous demo onto Reddit's R voice acting front page, where thread after thread debated the source of the raw emotive power and astonishing clarity. By midday, mainstream entertainment blogs had caught wind. Mystery narrator breaks VoiceWave records blared one headline. YouTube fragments of her teaser were reposted under no fewer than 7 prominent channels, each embedding the original audio, each increasing the view count exponentially. The clip hit 1 million plays before lunch, 2 million by tea time, and by 8 p.m. it had surpassed 5 million, a number previously unheard of on a platform that prided itself on curated artisan content. That evening, Jaya logged into her burner account and stared at the analytics dashboard in awe. Total plays, 483,212, peak concurrent streams, 48,327 average watch time, 58.7 seconds. Top referrals, VoiceWave Editor's Picks, Twitter, Reddit, Mashable, Indie Voice Weekly. She watched as comments scrolled faster than she could read them. Send this to Disney. Unsubscribe from my current VO artist. My soul just descended. One producer even posted, looking for the narrator of this. DM me. 2 casting agencies tweeted to Vox Enigma with professional inquiries. But Jaya, hiding behind a veil of anonymity, could only smile into the glow of her laptop, her heart pounding with equal measures of triumph and terror. As midnight approached once more, Jaya realized that her secret experiment had exploded into a cultural phenomenon. The same industry that had once snickered at her accent was now clamoring for the voice that had shattered their expectations. And while she still could not attach her name to the demo, too many non-disclosure agreements and audition protocols stood in her way, she understood that this viral teaser was her unwritten invitation. The world was listening, and soon she would step out of the shadows and claim the acclaim she had earned in the quiet darkness of her apartment. When the sun rose over Los Angeles, the morning after Jaya's teaser shattered streaming records, Vox Studios was already in crisis mode. By 8 a.m., urgent emails flooded every inbox. Who is this mystery narrator? Request for immediate rights clearance. Legal and talent, drop everything. In the executive suites, Vice President Marlene Cho slammed her coffee mug onto her mahogany desk, scattering sheets of listener comment reports and analytics printouts. "We have a runaway hit," she snapped at her assistant, "and it's not from anyone on our roster." Across town, the Pinnacle Collective, the powerhouse booking agency, received 6 desperate calls from major animation houses, high-profile video game producers, and streaming services, each clamoring to secure the Vox Enigma voice. By noon, Marlene had convened an emergency discovery meeting. The head of legal, the casting director who'd once laughed at Jaya's accent, and two senior producers who wielded the power to greenlight multi-million-dollar projects. They watched the 60-second clip on repeat, marveling at the emotional depth, the precise intonation, and the raw authenticity that no amount of vocal coaching could fabricate. Meanwhile, Jaya sat in her Burbank apartment, bleary-eyed from another midnight of polishing new demo reels, when her phone erupted with texts. "Call your agent. Studio wants to fly you out today. You're trending on Variety." She stared in disbelief at the name displayed on the caller ID, Vox Studios talent acquisition, and pressed answer with trembling fingers. On the other end, Marlene Cho's voice was both urgent and awed. "Jaya Patel, it's Marlene Cho. We made a terrible mistake. Will you come in for a meeting? Today?" 2 hours later, Jaya walked through the gleaming glass doors of Vox's main building, clutching her accents book and demo USB drive like talismans. In the boardroom, the same casting director, Trent, sat flanked by high-powered executives, his smug smile replaced by a look of genuine contrition. Marlene stood and offered her hand. "Jaya, we owe you an apology and an opportunity." Her co-executives nodded in agreement. "Your voice is the lead for our next global fantasy franchise. We want you to narrate the entire series premiere trailer, the international TV spots, and the streaming preview. And yes, in your original accent, unfiltered and untamed." Jaya's heart thundered as she sank into the plush leather chair. Trent rose and produced a glossy contract. Priority billing, a premium rate, and a first-look option for the franchise's sequel campaigns. "We want authenticity," he said, voice hushed with excitement. "Your accent isn't a barrier. It's the very reason viewers stop their scrolls." "You broke the ceiling, Jaya." As she signed her name, Marlene announced, "We'll fly you to London next week to record at Pinewood Studios. The world is yours." Walking out of Vox Studios that evening, Jaya felt the city's skyline glow like a constellation of possibility. The same studios that once snickered at her voice had now staked their biggest franchise on it. And as her signature voiceover, rich with every trace of her Mumbai roots, would soon herald the dawn of a new era in global entertainment, she knew she had transformed every whispered doubt into the roar of overnight triumph. When the clock on the streaming platform's midnight countdown ticked to zero, Jaya Patel sat backstage at the Petite Premiere Theatre in Westwood, heart hammering in rhythm with the ambient hum of anticipation. She wore the same deep emerald silk sari she had once debuted at a Mumbai book launch, the intricate gold embroidery catching the low foyer lights as she paced in front of a mirror. Outside the black curtain, the crowd had been gathering for hours, die-hard fans clutching their phones, entertainment reporters scribbling in notebooks, and the show's creator, Julian Mercer, pacing with a manic energy that rivaled Jaya's own. Inside the screening room, seating only 120 but simulcasting live to 5,000 virtual front-row guests equipped with VR headsets, the projectionist dimmed the house lights. A hush fell. Then, as the trailer intro began, Jaya's voice rose through the speakers. Rich, resonant, her accent infusing each syllable with a warmth and authority that felt both ancient and utterly modern. When legends sleep beneath starlight, only one voice can awaken the dawn. Every word landed like a promise. She recognized the hush that fell over the in-person audience and felt the VR viewers lean in, their avatars' heads tilting forward. At the 10-person streaming analytics war room downtown, rows of data scientists monitored real-time metrics across multiple screens. Within the first 30 seconds, the play counter jumped from 0 to 12,000. By the 2-minute mark, it had vaulted past 250,000. An alarm blinked, projected 24-hour views, 10M+. The lead data scientist, a lanky woman in a hoodie, fired off a Slack message to the content distribution team. "Prepare to scale to 50 Gbps. This is blowing up." Back at the theater, the main feature began. The new fantasy series, Eclipse of Empires. Its first episode anchored by Jaya's narration, woven through battle-scarred landscapes and whispered prophecies. In the VIP section sat key executives, network heads, advertising partners, and legacy Hollywood producers, many of whom had once urged a neutral accent. Now, as Jaya's voice wove through the opening credits, they exchanged awed glances. Some whispering, "That is pure magic." Others nodding, "This is what we've been missing." Across social media, the hashtag #JayaUnleashed trended within minutes. Fans clipped her first lines to TikTok, layering her voiceover beneath epic fan art animations. Voice of Dawn reached the top of Twitter's trending list in 6 countries. Subreddits exploded with threads like, "That accent gave me chills," and "Jaya Patel just saved fantasy narration." By dawn, fan translations of her lines appeared in German, Japanese, Spanish, each shared widely by local genre enthusiast communities. Meanwhile, in her Mumbai family home, connected by a 3 a.m. video link, her mother and father watched from their modest living room, tears in their eyes as they saw their daughter's name scroll in the opening credits. "She belongs to the world now," her mother whispered, pressing her hand to the screen. Her father raised a cup of chai in salute. By 6 a.m. Pacific time, the streaming platform's most popular chart lit up with Eclipse of Empires in the #1 slot, and Jaya's narration spot at #2 as a standalone featured voiceover track. The platform's blog published an article titled, "How a First-Time Lead Narrator Broke Our 24-Hour Record," quoting viewers who said her voice felt like coming home and rewrote the rules of mainstream appeal. Advertisers rushed to purchase. Mid-roll spots, the show's merchandise store sold out of collector's edition Blu-ray pre-orders. That afternoon, Jaya stepped onto the red carpet at the official gala screening. Flanked by the show's stars and the director, she paused before the media scrum. As cameras flashed, she placed a hand over her heart and smiled, a quiet, radiant smile born of triumph over every whispered doubt. When an interviewer asked, "Did you ever imagine your voice would reach this many people overnight?" she answered, voice steady and clear, "I always knew my story was bigger than any script. I just had to find the courage to speak it." In the days that followed, Jaya's name echoed through every corner of the industry. Podcast interviews, trade magazine features, late-night show invitations. Voiceover coaches hailed her as a revolutionary talent, and mentorship offers flooded her inbox. Yet amid the whirlwind, she returned each night to her quiet apartment, listening to the original high-fidelity recording that had first gone viral, reminding herself of the journey from midnight practice to record-shattering premiere. And as new messages of praise piled up, she tapped out a single reply to her thousands of fans worldwide. "Thank you for listening." When the dust of her record-shattering premiere finally settled, Jaya Patel found herself cradled in a whirlwind of plane tickets, press kits, and late-night Zoom calls with journalists spanning 6 continents. Yet no matter how many first-class seats she occupied or red carpets she navigated, her heart remained tethered to the streets of Mumbai, where every syllable of her accent had first been nurtured. So, when her agent handed her a bespoke itinerary, a global press tour that would touch Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, and ultimately Mumbai, she felt a surge of anticipation and a quiet resolve. She would return home as the artist she had always been, unapologetically herself. Her arrival at Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport was met with a throng of cheering fans holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Voice of Empires," and "Jaya, you made us proud." Under the neon glow of the arrivals hall, she paused to breathe in, the humid air scented with vadapav and monsoon promise. Reporters jostled for her attention, but she slipped past them into her mother's arms, her sari a swirl of emerald and gold, whose tears of joy confirmed that every struggle, every midnight recording session had been worth it. The next morning, Jaya spoke at a packed auditorium at the National Center for the Performing Arts, where aspiring voice artists filled every seat. The stage lights glinted off her name etched on the podium. Jaya Patel, a journey in voice and authenticity. She began by recounting her early days, mic tests that ended in laughter, critiques that urged her toward neutrality, and the late-night rigors that honed her craft. But it was her accent, once a source of mockery, that she celebrated most. "My voice," she said, "carries the cadence of my grandmother's lullabies and the rhythm of my mother tongue. When I embraced its uniqueness, I found the power to connect across oceans." Applause thundered as she invited students to recite lines in their own accents, turning the stage into a tapestry of languages woven together by shared vulnerability. Later that afternoon, Jaya hosted an intimate workshop in a sunlit studio overlooking the Arabian Sea. She guided a dozen young women, each from a different state of India, through a series of exercises designed to fuse regional intonation with universal storytelling. They practiced tongue twisters in Marathi, Punjabi, Tamil, and Bengali, then layered them with emotion. I summon the storm's fury, and in dawn's first light, hope still blooms. Jaya paired each student with a seasoned dubbing director, ensuring that every participant received industry-level feedback and an actionable roadmap for auditions beyond the workshop. By the end, the room buzzed with newfound confidence. The same shimmer of possibility Jaya had once chased in Los Angeles, now ignited on home soil. That evening, on the terrace of her family's ancestral home, Jaya hosted a small gathering of mentors and mentees. She poured cups of masala chai, each steam swirl catching the golden lamp glow, and listened as her protégés shared their stories of rejection and resilience. When one young artist confessed she'd almost surrendered her dream after years of sounding too regional, Jaya reached across the table and placed a hand on hers. "Your accent is your superpower," she whispered. "Let it guide your artistry, not hide it." Under the starlit sky, they toasted to futures unbound by bias, each sip of chai a promise of solidarity. By the time Jaya flew back to Los Angeles, she carried with her not just an international spotlight, but a renewed sense of purpose. She had proven that authenticity, once derided, could bridge cultures and shatter records. In every studio she entered thereafter, she narrated with the same warm lilt that had first defined her identity, never softening a single syllable. And in every role she chose, from documentary voiceovers capturing the pulse of distant lands to animated heroines whose journeys mirrored her own, her accent became the signature that drew listeners in, reminding the world that true power lies in the voice that dares to be heard exactly as it is.